And welcome everybody to the Daily Space Weather. Congratulations on finding our channel. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, including coronal mass ejections, their trajectory, the sun, a flare happening as we start to record the video. And so we're looking at the sun here in 171 angstroms, as well as colorized magnetogram from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. There are two sunspot groups. This active region up here is not a sunspot. At least last I checked. Down here we've got sunspot 2835 and sunspot 2836, which was the source of the flare I'm talking about. So here are the sunspots, and they're actually spreading apart. You can see there's distance growing between these two umbrae as well as these two umbrae down here, and that actually increases the likelihood of solar flares. Don't be surprised to see an M-class flare come out of this situation. And the most recent one was not an M-class flare. So let's talk about the coronal mass ejections. We're going to give you the viewpoint from Lagrangian point 5 as well as Lagrangian point 1, starting with Lagrange point 5 at stereo A. And there's the coronal mass ejection that we've been warning about. Keep in mind additional CMEs could certainly happen after this. And I brought back the data there a little bit. Note the time and date stamps down here. So that's the viewpoint from stereo A, a spacecraft that's able to see space weather ahead of Earth in that it's to the east of us. From the perspective of the sun, it sees solar weather before the Earth does. Now let's look at Lagrangian point 1 to see if we can get some additional telemetry on how that coronal mass ejection is oriented. And so far we don't see any ejecta that is directed toward the Earth. It all looks like it's headed off to the west. This is the LASCO C2 part of the SOHO spacecraft. And you can see you don't really see any ejecta here on the left side of the coronagraph disk, which is this obscurement disk here in the middle. Let's move on. 304 angstroms ionized helium is the best wavelength to see filaments. Let me speed that up a little bit. And often 304 angstroms does indeed show us where the coronal mass ejections came from. And if I had to guess, I would say they came from this area over here. There are still additional filaments down here in the south that could eject at any moment with pretty much no warning. Let's get into astrography. Here's the astrography of the solar system. In other words, it's where things are located now. Let's advance it 1 week. There's where things will be in a week on July 5th. Independence Day, less than a week away, folks. Next, looking at a star chart, I've faced mine to the south. The yellow line you see here is the ecliptic, the path the sun will take across the sky once it rises. If you're up before dawn, you may see Jupiter, Saturn, and the moon all very close together near the ecliptic. The 10.7 centimeter radio flux, I believe, is now reported at 87. And don't be surprised to see this continue to climb over the next couple days, especially assuming those sunspots do not degrade. We don't see any forecasts for any geomagnetic storms or anything like that, and I would tend to agree here. There is not anything geo-effective on the way to Earth at this moment. This is the NOAA forecast for geomagnetism, forecasting mainly just strictly calm conditions here over the next 3 days. And here's the 10.7 centimeter radio flux shown in Solon.info's graph. This black line here is the radio flux. The red line underneath it is the proportional number, sunspot number, as cycle 25 progresses. And let's take a look at earthquakes. Basically, what I have to say here is that there is a lull in 7 magnitude earthquakes. If you look at the 1 year bar graph here, you can see how many red lines we have there. Those are the 7+ magnitude quakes. And there is a periodicity, a cyclicity to those quakes. You can see there is a massive lull. Only 1 7 magnitude quake in the past 90 days. So if you're in an earthquake-prone zone, have a plan. Know which building facades may collapse if you're going to evacuate yours when things start to shake. We saw some 5 magnitude quakes here over the past 24 hours. It looks like they're all in the southern hemisphere. Let's take a look at the USGS list for a more complete listing. And if we miss anything, just leave us a comment. We consider the YouTube videos a collaborative effort. So leave us a comment if there's anything we leave out or anything that you'd like to just randomly talk about. 4.3 at Fiji showed up at an estimated depth of over 628 kilometers. So a very deep quake in the deep quake capital of the world. Another 512 kilometer deep quake there at a 4.5 magnitude, also near Fiji. At least one deep quake in South America there, a 4.4 at Chile. Indonesia saw a deep quake at a 4.7 magnitude. Looks like a bit of a swarm happening there in western South America. Indonesia saw one of the 5+ magnitude quakes here. Also, the East Pacific Rise saw a 5.3. That went out in the middle of nowhere. That portion of the South Pacific, one of the most desolate locations on Earth. There's nobody down there, and nobody's doing anything. Nobody's hanging out in that area. Anyway, that's your earthquake list. Let's check out volcanoes. Shivaluch, showing some activity here. An extruded lava dome has been cracking, and it looks like Shivaluch is about to erupt. Here's the list. The lava dome's cracks indicate its instability. So Shivaluch looking like it's fixing to erupt there on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Extreme eastern Russia. Suwanosejima also erupting here, flight level 040 as it produces a 4,000-foot plume of volcanic ash. Revenador exploding. 15,000-foot ash plume there. Sabancaya, sporadic volcanic ash puffs have produced a plume of 24,000 feet altitude. Flight level 240 as it explodes over Peru. Nevados de Chilean in central Chile also exploding. Intermittent emissions have produced a 12,000-foot plume of ash. Please don't pole vault the caldera. It could be unhealthful. And we need the views on YouTube. So tell your friends and foes about the channel and about smAsho.com, the provider of this important public service message. So here's the solar flare that was happening while we recorded the first part of the video, and turns out it's not quite a C-class flare. Once again, folks, I would remind you, don't be surprised to see an M-class flare out of one or both of those sunspots, Sunspot 2835 and Sunspot 2836. They both harbor significant active magnetic fields. No spikes in the proton flux, as no coronal mass ejections have been headed Earth's direction. Let's take a look at the ecliptic plane field plot from the top view. This is the Gong 2 data that we show daily. And the South Pole current sheet has been delayed as a result of those sunspots. So it has to do with the way activity like sunspots affects the sun's magnetic fields and their influence on the heliospheric current sheet, which you're seeing here in polarity. The green is the North Pole oriented. The red is the South Pole oriented current sheet. Continuing on, here's the line of sight field plot. It also shows you the solar magnetogram. And you can see that blue line way down south as a result of those two significant sunspot groups, 2835 and 2836. Also, we'll show you the coronal hole line of sight plot, which is probably the most important data set in terms of solar cycle progression. We see two coronal hole systems here reaching up toward the equator. The most defined is the South Pole oriented one, and it's around Sunspot 2835 and Sunspot 2836. Do I think there's a relationship between coronal holes and sunspots? Well, I certainly do. I just won't divulge it in this video. I'll have to save that for some other time, as it's the daily space weather. And here's another set of graphics showing the two main features on the sun: sunspots and coronal holes. Those are the two main features that we see, the two main features that exist. Coronal holes give us insight into the magnetic field progression of the sun. Sunspots give us insight into, I don't know, the solar output. And again, I think there is a relationship. I just won't divulge what I think it is in this video. I'll have to save that for a later video. Also, don't forget to check our cosmology segments on our playlist at youtube.com/smashamash/playlists. There are like 200 cosmology videos, and you can see the complexity of these two sunspot groups. They're both beta class sunspots in that they have two opposite polarity umbrae at least. And these gamma classifications are an indication of further magnetic field complexity. They're both exhibiting some, which increases the likelihood of solar flares. Let's talk about increasing the likelihood of these videos continuing to exist and remain publicly visible and free for all to view. Our patrons are assisting with that. Thanks, patrons. We greatly appreciate your monthly donations to our cause. And our patrons get all sorts of perks and early warnings that nobody else gets. Patreon.com/smashamash if you'd like all of those benefits. Thanks again, patrons. Patreon.com/smashamash is the URL. KP index currently at 0 as we see very calm geomagnetic conditions. Again, no significant plasma on the way to Earth from Sun at the moment. Next, looking at real-time solar wind, I think. Wait for it. It's worth it. And we're seeing a very slow and diffuse solar wind here. Current solar wind speed only 337 kilometers per second. Solar wind density only 3.28 protons per cubic centimeter. Here's the Geospace Magnetosphere movie, 4 hours of data, courtesy University of Michigan, showing very weak pressure around planet Earth, increasing the likelihood for higher cosmic ray flux. However, don't be worried, folks. The solar activity is indeed increasing as cycle 25 progresses. While slow, it's going to suddenly kick up. That's my forecast. Anyway, there's 4 hours of weak magneto to hydrodynamic pressure. Next, ground magnetic perturbations, Geospace Delta B, looking at changes to Earth's own B field on the ground level. Since we're living a geomagnetic excursion, we show the data daily. And like the last frame, this is 4 hours of data. Since it refreshed, we're going to let it play through in order to not have to edit the video. It helps us blast out more content in a timely fashion and provide you with all of the variables that are available and or relevant. Anyway, no major changes there to Earth's B field. No major surprise, as there's not that much magnetic induction caused by incoming solar protons. So we have 3 locations, folks, 3 locations on which our video content is located. Make sure you check all of them out as they all have exclusive content. First one is Twitch, twitch.tv/smashamash. It's where we like to stream live because Twitch is probably the ultimate live streaming platform. It's just great. Twitch.tv/smashamash. We'll stream later today for our meteorology segment. They've got a great mobile app also. It will alert you when we go live. Also on YouTube, which is where most of our video content is located, check our playlists. There's all kinds of stuff, including a cycling video and a video of Leaser Lake's fishing pier yesterday. Check that out. There's nature videos, all kinds of stuff at youtube.com/smashamash/playlists. We try to organize all of our videos into playlists to make it easier to navigate and find our content. Thanks to our YouTube subscribers. BitChute is another location, the third. Twitch, YouTube, and BitChute are our 3 locations. Also, don't forget to check out our own website, smashamash.org. We'll redirect you here to smashamash.com. And if you want to find us on social media, you can move this little arrow here, which will expose all of our social media accounts. We've got a Discord channel and all kinds of other locations in social media. Feel free to interact with us. You're invited. Today's cosmology segment will be integrated into the daily space weather video, and it will be quite short. So we've picked a random number. It's 3. A Safer 2 galaxy known as MRK 1501. There's that Safer 2 galaxy on Pan-STARRS, which includes the optical bands of Z and G. Here it is on the 2MASS, which is infrared light. And how about on the Galix? There it is on the Galix. That is ultraviolet light. And how about the XMM Newton? There is that active galactic nucleus, MRK 1501, in X-ray from the Multi-Mirror Project. Safer 2 galaxies are a specific type of active galactic nucleus. Here are the X-ray outputs. This galaxy is also known as QSO B0007 plus 107. I guess they thought it was a quasar. It's been reclassified to a Safer 2 galaxy. There's the 30-day X-ray output of that galaxy. Here's the 16-year output, and there's the daily output of that. And you can find that yourself if you want to look it up. It's on the Neil Gorell Swift Observatory. It's entry number 3, Galaxy MRK 1501, otherwise known as QSO B0007 plus 107. Here's the astronomy picture of the day. It's a partial solar eclipse, and I'm kind of over it. And that's today's Cosmology segment. We kept it short as there's a lot of stuff to cover. Next, talking about electrons, as they have the capacity to charge up satellites, but they're not doing it now. There are no charging hazards surrounding planet Earth. Here's the 1-year chart of the electron flux. Nothing to write home about there. Here's the 3-day chart, and we're seeing just moderate, normal levels of electron flux. Here's the forecast model for electrons, and we're expecting, at least as per NOAA's forecast, to see flat levels. The green boxes are the forecast. The yellow diamonds are the observation. Here's the total air column electron content. These blobs are representing differences in electron density. Your GPS has to communicate with a GPS satellite through those electrons, and it can cause massive distortions. I'll let it play through a second time. Here we see some anomalies in the southern hemisphere. The southern Indian Ocean. A little bit of anomalously high electron flux there. Nothing to write home about, nothing very extreme. A slight disorganization happening there with the electron flux. Here's a diagram of the Van Allen belts and distances to spacecraft in miles before we show the F ionosphere layer. And here's the F ionosphere layer, which is located at about 300 kilometers of altitude. It's just one slice of the atmosphere in vibrational frequency. And the F ionosphere is in many ways the bridge between space and Earth. That's why we show it daily. All your weather comes from space. It's part of our mission to inform you of this. And if you want to read about our mission, head to smashamash.com/forum/mission. smashamash.com/forum/mission. Ionosphere looking a little anomalously here, as we're seeing once again surprisingly high vibration over places like South America and the Central South Pacific. Not as extreme as a week ago today. There's the latest image from 8:30 Universal Time. Things looking fairly normal there. And now it's time for our bonus features, in the form of the latest hydrogen alpha imagery from the El Teide, Spain ground-based solar observatory, part of the National Sunspot Observatory. And we see filaments down here in the southern hemisphere. They could eject, although we're not going to say coronal mass ejection watch at this moment. It's too early to tell if the one we've been forecasting is done ejecting yet. There could be additional ejecta. We'll be keeping an eye on it. And when I say eye on, well, the pun is intentional. You can also see the flare that happened while we did the video right here out of the leading umbra, the leading South Pole oriented umbra associated with Sunspot 2836. You see a little brightening right there. That was a minor solar flare. I think only a B class. And here are additional bonus features. It's the thematic map, part of the GOES 16 SUVI suite of instruments. And you can see there are still significant filaments here on the central to western portion of the sun. By the way, we call this portion of the sun the east, as it's where space weather rises, and we call this the west because it's where space weather sets. Here's the latest image of the intensitygram. Here's a close-up of Sunspot 2835 and Sunspot 2836. They still harbor the type of magnetic fields associated with significant solar flares. Don't be surprised to see an M-class flare. And we've got another Sunspot 2837. Check it out. There it is. Sunspot 2837, it looks like it's alpha class. That won't contribute that much to solar flaring. Here are the fields associated with that new sunspot. It's only got one umbra. And here's 2835 and 2836. Last but not least, more bonus features. The final bonus feature shall be the 94 angstroms browse data imagery from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. And you can see some activity up here associated with this plage. Not to be confused with the sunspot, it doesn't have any umbrae. So there you go, sunspot 2837, here's 2835, here's 2836. We'll be keeping an eye on them. And when I say eye on, I think I told that one already. Anyway, thanks for tuning into the Daily Space Weather. Congratulations once again on finding that our channel exists. Don't forget to press like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Tell your friends and foes about the channel. And may that solar wind be at your back.